was actually a manuscript of the Gospel of Matthew in Hebrew, what's called Shem Tov's Hebrew Matthew. I talked about that in my book, The Hebrew YHShUA versus the Greek Jesus.
That's right.
And actually, this specific manuscript, the Breslau manuscript, we talked about in the Open Door series that we did, 18 wonderful hours of teaching. And one of the things we looked at there in the Open Door series is where the Pharisees come and they ask Yeshua, what is the most important commandment of all? And he responds, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your might and all your strength. And there's some ambiguity there when you compare the different Gospels in Greek and in English. And what I loved about this Breslau manuscript is there it says in Hebrew, V'ahavta et, and it has He, Hashem, representing Yud He Vav He, because a rabbi who copied this over the generations wouldn't put God's name, Yehovah, in outside the Tanakh, essentially.
Right.
Even when they copy the Talmud, they put in He or Yud or some other representation, Yud Vav Yud, or Yud Yud. So it's V'ahavta et Yehovah Elohecha b'chol vavcha v'chol nafshecha v'chol me'odecha. So he says, he's quoting Deuteronomy 6:5 verbatim, and then he says, this is the first and the greatest of the commandments, and the second is like it. And in the Hebrew, it's V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, which is from Leviticus 19. And then he says something really profound. Yeshua says something profound. V'al bet ha'ele ha'torah kula tluya v'hanevi'im. And upon these two, the entire Torah and the prophets hang. Now, when most Christians read that phrase, hang, I wonder if they really understand that there's a Hebrew idiom here. An idiom that any Jew would understand in the first century and any Jew who studied ancient Jewish sources would immediately recognize. And that idiom is this concept where hang there, what it really means is derive. And we have this example in rabbinical sources where they say all the laws of the Sabbath, meaning all the laws of the Sabbath in rabbinical law, in the oral law, hang upon, are like they're like a mountain hanging by a thread. And what they mean by that is we have 2 or 3 little verses in the Tanakh, and out of that they derive a myriad of laws. And they're actually saying this almost in a way that's in some sense ironic, right? You wouldn't know about these without the oral law, meaning the rabbis made up a bunch of laws, and then they said you wouldn't know about these laws from the Torah because they're like a mountain hanging by a thread. And what Yeshua, and here's the point, when it says hang, what it means is they derive. In other words, when Yeshua says upon these 2 commandments, the entire Torah and the prophets hang, it means the entire Torah and prophets derive. The central principle of all the Torah and the prophets is love Yehovah your God and love your neighbor as you love yourself. And a Jew hears that, and it's just so plain and simple. Jews think in these terms. There's 2 types of commandments. Ben Adam lechavero, between a man and his fellow, between a human and his fellow human. Ben Adam lamakom, between a man, a human, and the Creator, the Eternal One. And so that's how Jews think about the commandments. They'll say, okay, Shabbat, that's between man and God. Don't steal, that's between man and man. And there's an element with God, right? Because God watches you, but it's something that doesn't, that hurts your fellow man. And so these are the 2 underlying principles of Jewish thought. And so when Yeshua brings these 2 verses, he just silences the Pharisees. They're just blown away by what he said. Now, they're blown away for another reason. And the other reason they're blown away, we don't know from Matthew, but we find this out when we read the verse in Mark. Because in Mark 12:28-30, there's a slightly different expanded version, right? There's some words missing that we find in Mark. And in Mark, he doesn't start in Deuteronomy 6:5, love the Lord your God, love Yehovah your God. He starts in Deuteronomy 6:4. And there he quotes, Hear, O Israel, which in the Hebrew is Shema Yisrael, Yehovah Eloheinu, Yehovah Echad. Hear, O Israel, Yehovah is our God, Yehovah is one. And those are words that touch the heart of every Jew. I mean, they're so deeply ingrained in Jewish culture that they are literally, we are taught from the youngest age that those are the last words that you should speak on your lips before you die. And literally, there are stories you'll hear from people all the time that their grandmother, their grandfather, someone was on their deathbed and they were fading away, and they would stand with them and hold their hand and recite the Shema with them. And that is the most beautiful thing that a Jew can imagine, that as a person is passing on from this world, they proclaim, Yehovah is our God, Yehovah is one. I mean, those are just profound, really important words in the Jewish culture. And so for them to ask Yeshua, what is the most important commandment? And he starts with Shema Yisrael, Yehovah Eloheinu, Yehovah Echad. That would silence it would touch the heart of even the most stubborn Pharisee, deep in his soul. Through time, this verse became really even more important in Jewish culture.